I'm Isabella Thompson, 28 years old, and 6 months ago my entire world collapsed when I discovered my business partner had been systematically stealing from our company and selling our proprietary research to competitors. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife, but what my own family did next was even worse. If you've ever felt invisible in rooms full of people who should love you most, please let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe to join others who understand this particular kind of heartbreak. I met Marcus Chen during my final semester at MIT, where I was quietly finishing my PhD in computational biology, while most people assumed I was just another pretty face auditing classes for fun. The assumptions started the moment I walked into any room: long blonde hair, carefully applied makeup, and what my grandmother always called that California sunshine smile. People saw what they wanted to see, and I'd learned early that sometimes it was easier to let them. Marcus was different, though. He was hunched over a laptop in the corner of the graduate student lounge at 2 a.m, surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled papers, muttering something about protein folding algorithms that made absolutely no sense to anyone else within a 50-foot radius. I approached him with 2 fresh cups of coffee from the machine that dispensed something resembling actual espresso if you hit it just right. "You know," I said, settling into the chair across from him, "if you adjust the hydrophobic parameters in your model by about 15%, you might get the conformational stability you're looking for." He looked up at me like I'd just spoken fluent Mandarin, which, incidentally, I also could do. His dark eyes blinked slowly behind wire-rimmed glasses, and I watched him process not just my words, but the contradiction between what he was seeing and what he was hearing. "I'm sorry. Do you study here?" he asked, and I couldn't help but laugh. PhD candidate, actually. Computational biology with a focus on drug discovery algorithms. Isabella Thompson, though most people call me Izzy. That night marked the beginning of everything. Marcus had been struggling with a research project that had potential applications for early-stage cancer detection, but he was approaching it from a purely computational angle. I'd been working on something similar, but from the biological side, focusing on how certain proteins behaved in the presence of cancerous cells. When we started combining our approaches, something magical happened. Not just professionally, though our research began yielding results that had both our advisors suddenly very interested, but personally too. Marcus saw me. Not the blonde hair or the smile that everyone else fixated on, but the mind that lived behind it all. He'd bring me coffee at exactly the temperature I liked it, would listen to me ramble about protein structures for hours without his eyes glazing over, and somehow always knew when I needed to take a break and go for one of our long walks along the Charles River. Those walks became our thing. Every evening around sunset, we'd leave the lab and wander along the water, talking about everything from quantum mechanics to our childhood dreams to the terrible food in the graduate cafeteria. Marcus told me about growing up in San Francisco, the eldest son of immigrants who'd sacrificed everything for his education, how the pressure to succeed sometimes felt like carrying a mountain on his shoulders. I shared stories about my own childhood in Newport Beach, though I was careful about the details. My family owned Thompson Holdings, a mid-sized investment firm that specialized in biotech startups, but I'd learned early that mentioning money changed how people saw me. With Marcus, I could just be Izzy, the girl who loved science, who stayed up too late reading research papers, who could explain complex algorithms while braiding her hair. We graduated together on a rainy May morning, both of us wearing the same black gowns but carrying completely different dreams. Marcus had accepted a position at a prestigious research institute in Boston, while I'd been offered a postdoc that would have set me up perfectly for a traditional academic career. Instead, I surprised everyone, including myself, by suggesting we start our own company. "Think about it," I told him over dinner at our favorite little Italian place in Harvard Square, twirling pasta around my fork while our future spread out before us like an uncharted map. "We have the research, we have the passion, and we have something that could actually help people. Why should we hand it over to someone else to develop?" Marcus was skeptical at first. Starting a company meant risk, meant leaving the safety of established institutions, meant the possibility of failing spectacularly. But I could see the spark in his eyes, the same one I'd noticed that first night in the graduate lounge. The early years of Biogen Solutions were everything you'd expect from a startup born in a cramped Cambridge apartment that served as both our living space and our first office. We lived on ramen noodles and takeout Chinese food, worked 18-hour days without thinking twice about it, and celebrated every small victory like we'd just won the Nobel Prize. Marcus handled the computational modeling and the technical infrastructure, while I focused on the biological research and, increasingly, the business side of things. We were developing a diagnostic tool that could detect certain cancers months earlier than current methods, using machine learning algorithms to analyze protein patterns in simple blood tests. The science was solid, the potential market was enormous, and we were young enough to believe we could change the world. Our first real breakthrough came during year 3, when our diagnostic accuracy hit 94% in clinical trials. I'll never forget the moment Marcus burst into our new office space. We'd finally graduated from the apartment to an actual lab in a biotech incubator, waving the test results and grinning so wide I thought his face might crack. We'd done it. We'd actually done it. The celebration that night involved expensive champagne, terrible karaoke at a dive bar in Somerville, and Marcus telling me for the first time that he loved me. Not just as a business partner or a friend, but truly, completely, with the kind of love that made everything else fade into background noise. By year 5, Biogen Solutions had grown from 2 graduate students with a dream into a legitimate company with 12 employees, a state-of-the-art lab facility, and more investment interest than we knew what to do with. Our diagnostic tool had passed phase 2 clinical trials with flying colors, and we were fielding calls from pharmaceutical giants who wanted to license our technology. Marcus and I had found our rhythm, both professionally and personally. He proposed on a Thursday evening in our lab, getting down on one knee between the spectrophotometer and the centrifuge, holding a ring he'd designed himself with a diamond cut in the shape of a double helix. "Marry me, Dr. Thompson," he said, using the title he knew made me glow with pride. "Let's build this life together. Forever." Those days felt golden, like we were living inside a bubble where everything was possible, and nothing could touch us. Our morning routine involved coffee together in the kitchen of the condo we'd bought in Porter Square, Marcus reading the business section while I skimmed the latest research journals, both of us already planning the day's experiments and meetings. We'd drive to work together, spend our days pushing the boundaries of what was scientifically possible, then come home to cook dinner and debate the merits of different research approaches, until we fell asleep curled up together on our second-hand couch. Weekends meant farmers markets and hiking trails, long brunches with friends who were starting to believe we might actually pull this whole changing the world thing off. The investment meetings were going incredibly well. We had 3 major firms interested in Series B funding, all offering valuations that would have made us millionaires several times over. Our lead investor, Janet Rodriguez from Pinnacle Ventures, had become something of a mentor to me, teaching me the business side of biotech in ways that complemented my scientific training. "You have something special here," she told me during one of our coffee meetings in her downtown office, looking out over Boston Harbor while she flipped through our latest data. "The science is brilliant, the market timing is perfect, and you two have the kind of partnership that makes investors feel confident about long-term success." But I was starting to notice small things that didn't quite add up. Marcus had become increasingly secretive about certain aspects of our business operations, claiming he was streamlining our processes and optimizing our efficiency. He'd started having meetings that I wasn't invited to, phone calls he'd taken private, late nights at the office that he explained as administrative work that would bore me. When I asked about it directly, he'd smile that same warm smile I'd fallen in love with and assure me that he was just trying to handle the business details so I could focus on the science I loved. "You're brilliant at research, Izzy," he'd say, kissing my forehead in that way that used to make me feel protected but was starting to feel patronizing. "Let me worry about the boring corporate stuff." The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in October. I woke up early to prep for a crucial presentation to Pinnacle Ventures, the meeting that would likely determine our Series B funding. Marcus had already left for an early breakfast meeting with potential strategic partners, leaving me a note on the kitchen counter next to my coffee mug. "Knock them dead today, beautiful. I'll meet you at the office after your presentation. Love you always." The note was written on our company letterhead, and something about that small detail made me pause. Why would he use company stationery for a personal note? I shook off the feeling and focused on the day ahead, running through my presentation one more time while I waited for my Uber. The presentation went flawlessly. Janet and her team were clearly impressed with our latest clinical trial results, our projected market penetration, and our 5-year growth plan. "This is exactly the kind of innovation that gets us excited," Janet said, shaking my hand as the meeting concluded. "We'll have an official offer to you by end of week, but I can tell you now that you should expect something very favorable." I practically floated back to our office, my mind already racing with plans for how we'd use the new funding to accelerate our research timeline and expand our team. But when I arrived at Biogen Solutions, something was wrong. The usually bustling office was eerily quiet, and I noticed that several of our employees' desks had been cleared out completely. Sarah, our lead lab technician, was standing in the hallway looking pale and confused, holding a cardboard box filled with her personal belongings. "Izzy, thank God you're here," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "We've all been let go." Marcus called a meeting this morning and said the company was being restructured, that our positions were being eliminated effective immediately. He said you knew about it, that this was part of some larger strategic plan. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I hadn't known about any restructuring, had never agreed to lay off our team, and certainly would never have done it right before our biggest funding round. I rushed to Marcus's office, my heels clicking urgently against the tile floor, and found him calmly packing files into bankers' boxes. He looked up when I burst through his door, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe, or resignation. "Izzy, we need to talk," he said, setting down the file he'd been holding and straightening his tie in that nervous gesture I'd learned to recognize over the years. "What the hell is going on, Marcus?" I demanded, my carefully professional composure cracking for the first time. "Sarah says everyone's been fired? Janet from Pinnacle just told me we're getting a major funding offer, and you've laid off our entire team without consulting me? Are you out of your mind?" But even as I said the words, I could see from the look on his face that this wasn't some terrible mistake or misunderstanding. This was intentional. This was planned. And somehow, I'd been completely left out of it. Marcus sat down heavily in his desk chair, the leather creaking under his weight, and gestured for me to take the seat across from him. The same seats where we'd planned our future together, where we'd celebrated our biggest victories, where he'd first told me he loved me. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice carrying a tone I'd never heard before, distant, almost clinical. "The company is being acquired. Titan Bio made an offer we couldn't refuse, and the deal closes tomorrow. I've been negotiating with them for the past 3 months." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Titan Bio was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, known for buying up promising startups and either shelving their innovations or marking them up by thousands of %. Everything we'd worked for, everything we'd believed in about making healthcare more accessible and affordable, would disappear into their corporate machine. "We would never sell to Titan Bio," I said slowly, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "We've talked about this. We agreed that maintaining our independence was crucial to our mission. When did you even start these negotiations? Why wasn't I involved?" Marcus looked down at his hands, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because you would have said no. And Izzy, the offer is for $200 million. $200 million. We'd be set for life, both of us. We could retire, travel the world, never worry about money again. Isn't that worth something?" But I could see there was more he wasn't telling me. The way he avoided eye contact, the way his shoulders hunched forward, the slight tremor in his hands as he reached for his coffee cup. "What else, Marcus? What aren't you telling me?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm opening up in the earth. Finally, he looked up at me, and I saw in his eyes the answer to questions I hadn't even known I should be asking. "The patents are in my name," he said quietly. "All of them. The diagnostic algorithm, the protein analysis software, the machine learning models. Legally, I own the core intellectual property of this company." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's impossible. We developed everything together. My research, my discoveries, they're the foundation of our entire platform. How could the patents be only in your name?" "Because you trusted me to handle the legal paperwork," he said. And now there was something almost like pity in his voice. "You were always so focused on the science, so trusting when I said I'd take care of the business details. The patent applications, the corporate filings, the intellectual property assignments. You signed everything I put in front of you without reading it carefully. You trusted me completely, and I used that trust to protect our work. I felt like I was drowning, like the air had been sucked out of the room and replaced with something toxic and unbreathable. 5 years of my life, my research, my innovations, my dreams, all of it legally belonged to the man I'd planned to marry, the man I'd loved completely, trusted implicitly, built a future with. So what does this mean for me? I asked, though I was starting to understand the answer even as the words left my mouth. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Cambridge skyline where we'd imagined building our empire together. Titan Bio is offering you a consulting position. Very generous salary, full benefits, stock options. You'd be working on implementing your own discoveries within their research division. It's actually a fantastic opportunity for you professionally. He turned back to me, and I could see he was trying to convince himself as much as me. This is better for everyone, Izzy. More stable, more resources, less risk. And we'd still be together, just in a different context. But something in his voice told me that even that wasn't true. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me, and walked to his desk. There, partially hidden under some other papers, I could see the edge of what looked like a wedding invitation. I pulled it out, and my heart stopped completely. It was elegant, expensive cardstock with embossed lettering. Marcus Chen and Victoria Liu request the pleasure of your company at their wedding ceremony. The date was 3 weeks away. Who is Victoria Liu? I asked, my voice sounding strange and far away, like it was coming from someone else entirely. Marcus had gone very pale, and he reached for the invitation like he could somehow make it disappear. She works at Titan Bio, in their business development division. We've been working closely together on the acquisition. But I could see the truth written across his face, could see it in the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes, could see it in the guilty set of his shoulders. How long? I asked. How long have you been planning this? The acquisition, the patents, her? Marcus sat back down, suddenly looking older than his 31 years. Izzy, you have to understand. Business partnerships and personal relationships don't always work out the same way. What we had was real, but it was also complicated. Victoria understands the corporate world in ways that complement my career goals. I understood now, with a clarity that was almost blinding in its intensity. This had never been about protecting our work or securing our future together. This had been about Marcus positioning himself for maximum personal gain, using my research and my trust as stepping stones to a bigger, more profitable life. A life that didn't include me. You've been planning this for months, I said, and it wasn't a question anymore. The secret meetings, the late nights, the way you've been pushing me away from the business side. You've been stealing my life's work and planning to marry someone else, and you thought I'd just accept a consulting position and fade quietly into the background. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal, though that cut deep enough to leave scars I'd carry forever. The worst part was realizing that Marcus had never really seen me as an equal partner, despite all his words about loving my mind and respecting my work. To him, I'd always been the pretty blonde who provided the scientific foundation for his ambitions, someone whose contributions could be minimized and whose trust could be exploited, someone who could be discarded when a better opportunity came along. I stood there in the office we'd built together, surrounded by the dreams we'd shared and the future we'd planned, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The naive, trusting woman who'd believed that love and merit would always be enough was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. I won't take the consulting position, I told Marcus, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. And I won't be attending your wedding. Marcus looked almost relieved, like he'd been dreading a bigger scene, a more dramatic confrontation. I think that's probably for the best, he said. I hope you know that I did love you, Izzy. What we had was special, but sometimes people grow in different directions. I'm sure you'll find something that's right for you. I left that office with nothing but my purse and the laptop that contained backup copies of all our research data. Research that might be legally his, but was scientifically mine in ways no patent filing could erase. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, letting the full magnitude of the betrayal wash over me like a tsunami. Then I did what I always did when my world fell apart. I called my mother. "Mom," I said when she answered, my voice cracking despite my efforts to stay composed. "I need to come home. Something terrible has happened, and I need help." But instead of the immediate concern and support I'd expected, there was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. "Oh, honey," my mother said, and I could hear the distraction in her voice, the sound of papers rustling in the background. "What kind of help? Is this about money? Because your father and I are dealing with some significant financial pressures right now, and we really can't be taking on additional expenses." Even in my devastated state, that response felt wrong. Thompson Holdings was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. My family had never worried about money, had never hesitated to help when one of us was in crisis. "No, Mom, not money. Marcus has been lying to me about everything. He's stolen my research, he's selling our company, and he's getting married to someone else. I need to come home and figure out what to do next." Another pause, longer this time, and when my mother spoke again, her tone had shifted to something almost businesslike. "Isabella, sweetheart, I think you might be overreacting. Business partnerships can be complicated, and sometimes what feels like betrayal is really just good business sense. Have you considered that maybe Marcus is protecting your interests in ways you don't fully understand? And as for his personal life, well, you're a beautiful, intelligent woman. You'll have no trouble finding someone new." I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what I was hearing. My mother, who had raised me to believe in my own worth and capabilities, was dismissing the theft of my life's work as good business sense and treating the destruction of my 5-year relationship like a minor inconvenience. "Mom, he stole my patents, my research, my discoveries, everything I've worked for. He's been lying to me for months, maybe years. This isn't about finding someone new. This is about everything I've built being taken away from me." "Oh, honey," my mother said, and now her voice carried the patronizing tone I remembered from childhood, the one she used when she thought I was being dramatic or unrealistic. "You know how these things work in business. The person who handles the paperwork usually ends up with the legal ownership. That's just how it is. And honestly, maybe this is for the best. Running a company is incredibly stressful, and you've always been more suited to the research side anyway. Why don't you take some time to rest, maybe travel a little, and then think about what you really want to do with your life?" I ended the call and sat there in the gathering dusk, watching the lights come on in office buildings around me, each one representing someone else's dreams and ambitions and hard work. For the first time in my adult life, I felt completely alone. The two people I'd trusted most in the world, Marcus and my mother, had both made it clear that they saw me as secondary, supporting character in my own life story. But as I sat there, something began to crystallize in my mind. A plan so audacious and risky that 6 months ago I would have dismissed it as impossible. I wasn't going to fade quietly into the background. I wasn't going to accept a consolation prize or reinvent myself to fit into someone else's vision of what my life should be. I was going to take back everything that had been stolen from me, and I was going to do it in a way that would make sure Marcus Chen and everyone else who had underestimated me would never forget the name Isabella Thompson. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to Janet Rodriguez at Pinnacle Ventures. "Janet, I need to tell you something about the Biogen acquisition," I said, sitting in my empty condo surrounded by boxes I'd started packing the night before. "Marcus has been negotiating this deal without my knowledge or consent, and I believe he's misrepresented our intellectual property ownership structure." Janet's response was immediate and sharp. "What exactly are you saying, Isabella?" "I'm saying that while the patents may be in Marcus's name, the underlying research and discoveries are mine. I have 5 years of lab notes, research data, and documentation that proves my role in developing every aspect of our technology. And I'm also saying that I don't believe this acquisition is in the best interests of bringing our diagnostic tool to market in a way that actually helps patients." Janet was quiet for a long moment. "Are you saying you'd be interested in alternative arrangements? Because if what you're telling me is true, this changes everything about how we'd approach any potential investment." That's when I made my second call, to the best intellectual property attorney in Boston. I need to explore my options for challenging patent ownership, I told Rebecca Martinez when she took my call. And I need to understand what it would take to start over completely with my own research. Rebecca's response was more encouraging than I'd dared to hope. If you can document your role in the original research and demonstrate that you were misled about the patent applications, you may have grounds for challenge. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but intellectual property theft is taken very seriously, especially in biotech. My third call was to my bank, where I discovered that my personal savings from 5 years of modest salaries and careful investing totaled just over $300,000. Not enough to start a biotech company from scratch, but enough to begin. That night, I called Marcus one final time. I want you to know, I told him, that I'm not taking this lying down. I'm going to fight for what's mine, and I'm going to make sure everyone in the industry knows exactly what kind of person you are. His response was predictably dismissive. Izzy, you're being emotional. You need to think clearly about what's best for your future. Fighting this will only make you look bitter and vindictive. Take the consulting position, move on with your life, and stop trying to rewrite history. But history, as I was about to prove, is written by the winners. And I was just getting started. The legal battle took 8 months. 8 of the most grueling, expensive, emotionally devastating months of my life. Rebecca Martinez turned out to be worth every penny of her astronomical fees, systematically building a case that demonstrated not only my fundamental role in developing our technology, but Marcus's deliberate deception in filing patents without my knowledge. The discovery process revealed a paper trail of emails and documents that painted Marcus in an increasingly unflattering light, showing how he'd been positioning himself to push me out while simultaneously courting Titan Bio and Victoria Liu. The breakthrough came when Rebecca uncovered Marcus's correspondence with Titan Bio's legal team, including an email where he explicitly referred to me as the blonde lab assistant who helped with some of the preliminary research. When that email was read aloud in court, I watched the color drain from Marcus's face and knew we had him. You don't refer to your co-founder and equal partner, someone with an MIT PhD, as a lab assistant, unless you've been systematically undermining their contributions from the beginning. The settlement was everything I'd hoped for and more. Marcus retained ownership of the existing patents, but I received recognition as co-inventor on all future filings and a substantial financial settlement that acknowledged my stolen contributions. More importantly, the settlement included a non-compete clause that prevented Marcus from developing similar technology for 3 years, effectively killing the Titan Bio deal. But the real victory came when several former Biogen employees reached out to me during the legal proceedings, sharing stories of how Marcus had instructed them to minimize my role in company communications and presentations. Sarah, our former lab technician, provided the most damaging testimony. Marcus told us that Isabella was primarily involved for her family's connections and investment potential. She testified under oath. He said she was bright enough, but that we shouldn't expect her to understand the more complex aspects of our research. He specifically instructed us to direct all technical questions to him, even when those questions were about Isabella's own discoveries. With the legal victory behind me, I faced a choice. I could use my settlement money to start fresh, build a new company from the ground up, and spend years trying to recreate what Marcus had stolen. Or I could do something far more satisfying. 3 days after our settlement was finalized, I called Janet Rodriguez and made her an offer she couldn't refuse. I want to buy Titan Bio's diagnostics division, I told her, sitting in her office overlooking Boston Harbor with a business plan I'd been developing for months. They're vulnerable right now after the failed Biogen acquisition, and their diagnostic technology is years behind where the market is heading. With Pinnacle's investment backing and my expertise, we could build something that actually serves patients instead of just maximizing profits. Janet leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. You want to buy the company that was going to buy you out? She asked. That's either brilliant or completely insane. I smiled back, feeling more confident than I had in years. Why not both? The acquisition took 6 more months to negotiate, during which time I threw myself into due diligence with the intensity of someone who had learned never to trust anything at face value again. Titan Bio's diagnostics division was indeed struggling, weighed down by outdated technology and a corporate culture that prioritized profit margins over innovation. Their diagnostic tools were accurate but expensive, slow, and required specialized equipment that put them out of reach for most community hospitals and clinics. When we finally closed the deal, I walked into Titan Bio's headquarters in downtown Boston as the new owner of their entire diagnostics operation, including 200 employees, 3 research facilities, and a pipeline of products that I immediately knew how to improve. The first thing I did was call an all-hands meeting. "I'm Isabella Thompson," I told the assembled staff, standing in the same conference room where Titan Bio executives had once planned to acquire my life's work for a fraction of its value. Some of you may know me as the woman whose research was nearly stolen by her business partner. Today, I'm your new boss, and I'm here to tell you that everything is about to change. The transformation of Thompson Diagnostics, yes, I renamed the division, became something of a legend in biotech circles. Within 18 months, we had improved the accuracy of our core diagnostic platform by 30%, while reducing costs by nearly half. We launched community outreach programs that brought early cancer detection to underserved populations, exactly the kind of work I'd dreamed of doing when I first started Biogen with Marcus. But the most satisfying moment came 2 years after the acquisition, when Marcus Chen showed up at my office unannounced. His wedding to Victoria Liu had apparently lasted less than a year, ending when she left him for a senior executive at another pharmaceutical company. His attempts to start a new biotech venture had been hampered by the non-compete clause from our settlement, and word had gotten around the industry about his business practices. "Izzy," he said, standing in my doorway looking older and considerably less confident than the man who had once tried to steal my future. "I was hoping we could talk. Maybe grab coffee, like old times." I looked up from the research proposal I'd been reviewing, a project that could revolutionize early-stage disease detection and would generate patents with my name prominently featured. "I'm sorry," I told him, not unkindly but with complete finality. "I don't have coffee with people who steal intellectual property, but I hear you're looking for work. We're hiring lab technicians if you're interested. The pay isn't great, but it's honest work." The look on his face was worth every sleepless night, every legal fee, every moment of doubt I'd endured over the past 3 years. He started to say something, then seemed to think better of it, and walked away. I never saw him again. My family's reaction to my success was complicated, to say the least. When Thompson Diagnostics was featured on the cover of Forbes as one of the fastest-growing biotech companies in the country, my mother called to congratulate me. "We always knew you had it in you, sweetheart," she said, as if she hadn't dismissed my crisis and my capabilities just 3 years earlier. "Did you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because I remember you telling me that running a company was too stressful for me, and that I should be grateful for whatever consulting position Marcus offered me." There was a long pause, and when my mother spoke again, her voice was smaller, more uncertain. "I think we were trying to protect you from getting hurt worse than you already were. Maybe we didn't handle it the right way. It took time, but we rebuilt our relationship on different terms. My family had to accept that I was no longer the accommodating daughter who would defer to their judgment, and I had to accept that people who love you can still fail you in fundamental ways." My mother became one of Thompson Diagnostics' biggest champions, though she never quite stopped being surprised when reporters referred to me as one of the most innovative minds in biotech. The personal healing took longer than the professional success. Trust, once broken so completely, doesn't easily repair itself. I dated occasionally but found it difficult to believe that anyone could see past the public success to the person underneath. Until I met Dr. James Morrison at a medical conference in San Diego, where he was presenting research on pediatric oncology, and I was discussing our latest diagnostic innovations. James was different from anyone I'd dated before. Quieter, more thoughtful, completely unimpressed by my business success, but fascinated by the scientific reasoning behind my work. He was a practicing pediatric oncologist who had seen firsthand how early detection could save lives, and he understood the emotional weight of work that lived at the intersection of cutting-edge science and human suffering. "You know what I love about your diagnostic platform?" he told me over dinner on our 3rd date, cutting into his salmon while I tried not to overthink every word he said. "It's not just elegant science, though it is that. It's science with purpose. You can see in every design decision that you were thinking about a real patient, a real family getting news that might save their child's life. 6 months later, when James proposed during a quiet weekend at his cabin in New Hampshire, he didn't do it with grand gestures or expensive rings. He simply looked at me over morning coffee and said, "I want to spend my life with someone who fights for what matters. Will you marry me?" The ring was simple, beautiful, and entirely my style. Not because he'd been coached by friends or done elaborate research, but because he'd been paying attention. Our wedding was small, held in the garden behind the house we'd bought together in Cambridge, surrounded by people who had supported us through the worst and best of times. Janet Rodriguez was my maid of honor. Rebecca Martinez handled the legal aspects of our prenup with characteristic efficiency, and even Sarah, my former lab technician who had become head of research at Thomson Diagnostics, flew in from the conference where she was presenting her own groundbreaking work. Marcus wasn't invited, obviously, but the ghost of our failed partnership lingered anyway. At one point during the reception, as James and I danced to a song that had nothing to do with any memories of anyone else, I caught sight of my reflection in the string lights hanging from the oak trees. Same blonde hair, same smile, same face that had caused so many people to underestimate what lived behind it. But now I saw what James saw, what my team at Thomson Diagnostics saw, what the biotech industry had finally learned to see. Not just a pretty face or a trust fund baby or someone's supportive girlfriend, but Dr. Isabella Thompson, MIT PhD, biotech entrepreneur, and the woman who had bought her way back to the top. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to steal my life's work, Marcus had forced me to become stronger, smarter, and more successful than I ever would have been if he'd simply been honest from the beginning. His betrayal had burned away every part of my personality that depended on other people's approval or validation. What remained was harder, more focused, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who thought they could dismiss me based on appearances. 2 years into our marriage, Thomson Diagnostics went public with the largest biotech IPO in Massachusetts history. The company that had started as a desperate attempt to reclaim stolen research was now valued at over $2 billion, with diagnostic tools being used in hospitals across 43 countries. James and I celebrated by taking our first real vacation in years, 2 weeks in New Zealand where we hiked and read terrible novels and didn't check our emails more than twice a day. On our last night in Auckland, sitting on the balcony of our hotel room overlooking the harbor, James asked me something I'd been wondering about myself. "Do you ever regret how it all happened?" I mean, obviously Marcus was terrible and what he did was unforgivable, but would you change it if you could? Would you go back and make him a better person, avoid all the pain? I thought about it seriously, watching the lights of the city reflect on the dark water. The person I'd been before Marcus's betrayal had been softer, more trusting, perhaps happier in some naive way. She'd believed that talent and hard work would always be enough, that people who claimed to love you would never deliberately hurt you, that the world was fundamentally fair for those who played by the rules. "No," I said finally, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I wouldn't change it. That woman he betrayed was never going to build something like Thomson Diagnostics. She was too accommodating, too willing to let other people take credit, too afraid of seeming difficult or demanding. She might have been a good scientist, but she never would have been a great leader." James reached over and took my hand, his fingers warm against mine in the cool evening air. "So Marcus accidentally created his own worst nightmare," he said with a smile. "A woman who's smarter than him, more successful than him, and completely immune to his manipulation." "Pretty much," I agreed, though I prefer to think of it as him accidentally creating someone who was always inside me, just waiting for the right catalyst to emerge. Looking back now, I realize that my story isn't really about Marcus Chen or stolen patents or business betrayal, though those things were certainly part of it. It's about the moment when you stop being who other people expect you to be and start being who you actually are. It's about learning that the opinions of people who underestimate you literally don't matter, that trust is earned rather than given, and that sometimes the most important person to believe in your capabilities is yourself. The woman who sits in the CEO chair at Thomson Diagnostics today is someone Marcus never really knew, even during our 5 years together. She's someone my family is still getting used to, Someone who surprises even my closest friends with her willingness to take calculated risks and make hard decisions. She's definitely someone who would never, ever sign legal documents without reading them carefully, or trust anyone to handle the business details on her behalf. But she's also someone who can sleep peacefully at night, knowing that her success was built through her own intelligence, determination, and strategic thinking, rather than through manipulation or betrayal. She's someone who employs over 400 people doing meaningful work that saves lives. Someone who has proven that you can be both profitable and ethical. Someone who has turned the phrase, "just a dumb blonde," into the punchline of the biggest joke in biotech history. If you're watching this because someone in your life has betrayed your trust, stolen your work, or tried to convince you that you're not capable of the success you've earned, I want you to know something. They're wrong about you, and proving them wrong will be the most satisfying thing you ever do. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but it will be worth it. The people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest gift they possibly can, the element of surprise. Use it wisely, use it strategically, and use it to build something so undeniably successful that they'll spend the rest of their lives wondering how they could have been so wrong about who you really are. Don't let anyone write your story for you. Don't accept the supporting role in your own life. And definitely don't let anyone tell you that fighting for what's yours makes you difficult, or vindictive, or unrealistic. The world needs more women who refuse to be minimized, who claim credit for their own work, and who understand that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear. Take it from someone who learned the hard way. Your value isn't determined by other people's ability to recognize it. Your intelligence isn't diminished by their assumption that you lack it. And your potential isn't limited by their failure of imagination. You know who you are. Now show them. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single comment, and I love hearing from people who understand that sometimes the best revenge really is living well. Next week, I'll be sharing the story of how I poached Titan Bio's 3 best researchers by offering them the one thing their old company never would: the chance to put their names on their own discoveries. Until then, remember, they might call you just a dumb blonde, but they'll never forget the day you proved them wrong.